everyone. We will get started here. Just to be cognizant of your time, it is now 11:30. My name is Sarah Cosmerl, and I am an advisor with Blue Heron Financial Group in Annapolis, Maryland, but we have the privilege of working with clients all over the country. I do want to take a moment to thank Northrop Grumman Federal Credit Union for the partnership. This year, we celebrated 25 years. So over 2 decades of partnering with the credit union and Northrop employees as well. The topic of today's presentation is Retain Your Brain. We thought this was a very fitting topic given it is November, which is hard to believe, and also Long-Term Care Insurance Awareness Month. Of course, the goal of this month is to bring awareness to long-term care insurance and the value it can bring, but to hopefully also spark something in us to think about what would the plan be if some type of long-term care need were to arise, myself included. And I know for many of you on this call, we do not need to look too far to know someone that is currently receiving some type of long-term care, perhaps some memory or cognitive decline. So the importance is there, and hopefully this is a jump start on that. For any individual questions about long-term care planning, our contact information will be at the end, and we're happy to be a resource there. But I am also very excited to introduce our guest speaker today, who is going to take it away with the presentation, John Deal. John has been with the Hartford and the Hartford Funds, which are an investment partner of Blue Heron, for more than 30 years. He is a certified financial planner and also holds Chartered Life Underwriter and Chartered Financial Consultant designations. As Senior Vice President of Applied Insights, John leads Hartford Funds research efforts with the MIT Age Lab, as well as other thought leaders. He oversees a team of industry experts who translate this research into actionable ideas for financial professionals and their clients across the U.S. John's views on the future of retirement planning have been published in the Wall Street Journal, Financial Planning Magazine, and other publications. He has also been a featured guest speaker on CNBC and Bloomberg Television. So, John, we are grateful to have you on the call this morning. Please, without further ado, I will turn this over to you.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thanks everyone for joining today. As Sarah mentioned, I have been with Hartford and Hartford Funds a very long time, but the last 25 years or so of my career have been spent studying aging and longevity in the United States and around the world. And we do that most closely with our relationship with the Age Lab at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Some of you may not have realized that MIT actually has a division of their engineering school studying aging and longevity, and they do that to benefit the corporate partners, businesses, and product innovators who are thinking about the products, services, maybe even environments that we'll find ourselves in future years. Well, you can't study aging and longevity for too long without running into the topic of cognitive health, specifically long-term cognitive health. And it's really a topic that I've avoided with every ounce of my soul for about the first 15 years of my career studying longevity. And the reason I did that is largely personal. And maybe some of you can identify with the kind of circumstance that kind of shaped my view. Back over 30 years ago, when I was in my mid 20s, I was named legal guardian of my grandmother, who at the time had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease for about 3 years. Well, if we put ourselves in the time machine, go back to our mid 20s, and think about how you're trying to figure out the world yourself, let alone make crucial decisions for a loved one, it was a very trying period for me. Locating resources, understanding the correct steps to take. I tell folks that I got a lifetime of experience in about 3 years that she survived after that. But for that reason, back then, it was kind of thought cognitive health issues, dementia, Alzheimer's disease being one type of dementia, was largely in your stars, right? It was in your genes. If family members had it, you crossed your fingers, hoped you wouldn't get it, and that was all that could be done. About, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, I was first introduced, partly through the research that we were doing at MIT, to a gentleman named Dr. Mark Milstein. Dr. Mark Milstein is not associated with MIT. He's actually a PhD from UCLA out in Los Angeles, California. Dr. Milstein is a brain researcher, and he's also an author. And he authored a book called The Age Proof Brain. The topic of his book and the topic of his study is that what we know today is that we have strong evidence that simple lifestyle interventions can dramatically improve brain health and lower the risk of long term cognitive disease today, tomorrow, and in the years to come. Well, this had been the first time that I've ever heard something like this, that we might have agency. In other words, there may be things that we can do, research is now showing, that can dramatically reduce the risk of contracting long term cognitive disease over the course of our lifetimes. Now, nothing's a guarantee, but if there are any steps that we can take to lower that risk, I think we can all agree that we would be wise to kind of understand what they are, and maybe if we're able, implement some of those. So, right up front, I want to share with the audience, Sarah, that you mentioned I have a number of designations after my name, but one of them is not MD. I am not a medical doctor. So before you listen to hear what I have to say today and decide to implement some changes, if you're changing exercise routines, diets, things like that, we highly recommend you do so under the counsel of your primary care physician. And you'll hear me reference that several times throughout the presentation. But I think you'll agree with me that some of the things that research is showing are showing us that we don't have to turn our worlds upside down. When Dr. Milstein says simple lifestyle interventions, I think we'll agree in time that that is truly what we're talking about. So, the agenda for today's call, I want to talk a little bit about your age and your brain's age because they can be different. And I'm not talking here about the number of years you've hung out on Earth together, your chronological age. I'm talking about functional age. And we'll explain why much of the research that we're referring to has to do with this point that some people's brains can be older or younger than they are. I'll do the best that I can to explain what we know happens to the brain as we age. And really, these lifestyle interventions that we're talking about are really going to be things that we can do to aid our own bodies in promoting the cleanliness and the health habits for the brain that we were naturally designed with. And lastly, really the meat of the batting order, I'm going to take just five of these areas, five lifestyle areas where research is now pointing to the fact that simple interventions can make a big change. And by the way, when I say that research is now pointing to the fact, a lot of the research that I'll share with you today has only been discovered over the last 10 to 15 years, if not sooner. And so it is relatively recent research. And the reason why I was attracted to it is it's now hopeful research, again, stating that there may be things that we can do to lower the risk of long term cognitive issues. So let's talk about your age versus your brain's age. Now, again, I kind of already mentioned, I'm not talking here about chronological age, like you were born this year and your brain is that old. We're talking about functional age. When we talk about functional age, we talk about things like how would your cognitive abilities compare to people of your similar age? And you probably guessed it, but your brain may not be the same age as you. Your brain can be either older or younger than you are. And when we say older or younger, I'm talking about things like how well are you able to recall things from memory? How well are you able to manage things from an executive decision process standpoint? So, how do we know that your brain can be older or younger than you are? Well, the question is, some of you may have heard, or maybe you haven't, about a group of people around the world called super agers. If you haven't heard of super agers, maybe you've heard of something called blue zones. Blue zones, let me start there. Blue zones are geographic areas around the world. I can't remember if there's six or seven of them, but there's one in Okinawa, Japan. I know there's one in Greece. There's one in Costa Rica. The closest one to us is probably Loma Linda, California. But what is a blue zone? It's a geographic area where people who live in that geographic area actually have longer life expectancy than the peoples who live around them. So there's a designated geographic area where even though the genetics are quite the same because these are surrounding areas, but people in the blue zone actually live longer than the people who live just outside of the blue zone. When you can identify a population like that, they make perfect test subjects to say, well, if genetics are similar, then what is it that this group of people who are living longer are doing that this group of people are not? If you're interested in the topic, actually, Netflix has a special. I think it's like a six-part series called Blue Zone Secrets of Living to Age 100. It's actually a pretty good series to watch. Well, how does this relate to superagers? Well, superagers are people around the world who are in their 80s and 90s, but display the cognitive ability of people in their 40s and 50s. So imagine that the ability to be able to recall things from memory, the ability to be able to focus and concentrate. And in some of these cases, the superagers share the same genetic markers as people in the general population. So it's not strictly a genetic issue. And if it's not strictly a genetic issue, then what is it? Well, we believe this is what's leading researchers to study these lifestyle factors that may promote healthier brains over the course of life's journey. Well, if you wanted to get a sense of your brain's age, or maybe, someone close to you that maybe you're starting to become concerned about, Dr. Milstein says there's really five questions we can be asking ourselves. Now, the good news about these five questions, you don't have to share the answers with anyone. But why are they important? Remember, I talked about my grandmother earlier. 30 years ago, there were some physicians that might not even diagnose Alzheimer's in its first stage. And you say, well, why not? Well, diagnostics were only about 50-50. And the other issue, which is still an issue today, is that if I correctly diagnosed a patient with Alzheimer's disease, I don't know whether they're going to live another 2 years or another 22 years. So, would I really want to ruin someone's life today by diagnosing them? If they woke up tomorrow morning and couldn't find their car keys, they say, oh no, is today the day that it's starting? So it went undiagnosed. But, folks, here's what we can tell you today. Early detection of cognitive issues are absolutely important to identify. And it's absolutely important to begin a conversation with your primary care physician about what's going on because look, it could be dementia, some type of dementia, but it could be a drug reaction, maybe two drugs you're taking reacting with one another. It could be an allergic reaction. It could be an untreated health condition away from the brain that's masking the symptoms of forgetfulness, so on and so forth. So that's why these questions are important because if there's any cause to say, should I be worried about that? It's really the genesis of a reason to call the doctor and have a conversation. So let me briefly touch on these. How well can I manage my day? I'm not talking about you forgot where you put your car keys or you drove to the airport and you can't remember what parking spot you're in. We all do that. I'm talking about you drove somewhere and you can't remember how to get back home. I'm talking about you're missing repeated important events on your calendar. In other words, it is messing with the management, your day to day management functions of your day, and it's beginning to impact your life. Secondly, how well can I remember important information? Question for you all. How many of you could tell me the phone number of the childhood home you grew up in? I certainly could. But if I asked you to dial a son, a daughter, or a grandchild today, could you tell me their digits? Many of us can't because since the mid 2000s, where this little contraption was rolled out, we were told to take everything that's up here and dump it onto our phones, our tablets, or our computers. Dr. Milstein says memory is like a muscle, it needs to be exercised. It's not a bad idea to flip over the grocery list from time to time, try to recall what's on it, flip over the to do list, try to remember the top five things that were on your to dos for the day. How well can I move and maintain balance? Well, aside from joint issues that may prevent you from moving or maintaining balance, many of us don't think of movement and balance as cognitive functions, but they truly are. In fact, if you've ever visited someone that might have recently suffered a stroke, oftentimes balance is one of the things that's most dramatically impacted, even the ability to sit up on the edge of a bed. Number four, the one that trips everyone up, no pun intended. How fast can I walk? I'm not going to tell you that if you can't walk at, 5 miles an hour at a 10% incline for 45 minutes, you're doomed. But what I can tell you is that people who walk at an accelerated pace tend to exhibit longer periods of cognitive health. They think it has to do with the health of your cardiovascular system because the brain needs to constantly be supplied with oxygen. The healthier our heart and lungs, the better functioning our brain. The brain is not independent of all the other body systems, but a healthy heart and lungs can keep that brain supplied with oxygen for a long time. So, if there was one thing I recommend you do, that research, as I referenced, now says may lower the risk of long term cognitive health by 30 to 40%. What would that one thing be? It would be walking, at least daily. How much walking? Do you have to train for the Ironman? 30 minutes a day. The 30 minutes a day do not have to be contiguous, but for 6 to 9 of the 30 minutes, try to accelerate your pace over what you would normally walk at. Again, that stresses the cardiovascular system just enough to strengthen it over time. And that's where researchers are showing the largest benefits for cognitive health. So, a simple thing like walking on a regular basis. Lastly, how old do I feel? What in the world does how old do you feel have to do with your cognitive health? Well, it's interesting, and that research now shows that for someone that says they sometimes or often feel lonely, which we know is an increasing risk as we age, and especially if we're aging alone, people who say they feel older than they actually are tend to be more physically active if they feel younger than they actually are. And if they feel younger than they actually are, they tend to be more socially active. And what I was referring to just a moment ago, people who say they're sometimes or often lonely, research now shows it's the physical equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. From physical inactivity to social kind of debilitation. Just the fact that we are not social, we were built as social creatures, and I'll talk more about this in a moment. But remember, people who say they feel younger than they are, more physically active, which relates back to number four, and more socially active, really crucial for long-term cognitive health. Well, there's two myths that we often hear when we talk about cognitive health. The first is, oh, well, that's just a normal part of aging. There's really nothing I can do about it. Cognitive disease is disease, right? So, no, it's not a part of normal aging. And again, I think the emphasis here is on early detection. The earlier it can be detected, the broader perhaps the treatment regimens that may be implored not only to, well, not necessarily to cure the disease if it is indeed dementia, but maybe we can lengthen the time that symptoms set in, so on and so forth. So maybe slow the progression in any hope. But the one we hear most of the time is the one on the right. Well, as I mentioned, my grandmother had dementia. I have relatives with dementia. It's in my genes. There's nothing I can do to avoid it. Dr. Milstein points out, and hear me on this, he says that 95 to 99% of cases of Alzheimer's disease are not genetically determined. 95 to 99% are not genetically determined. I didn't say, excuse me, that genes don't play a factor, but we're talking about determinative disease. Sadly, the 1 to 5% where genes are determinative tend to be in the area of early onset Alzheimer's disease. Early onset is a genetically linked disease. Sadly, if you've been past the gene for early onset, it's highly likely that you will develop the disease. But for the other 95 to 99% of cases, if it's not strictly genetic, well, then what would it be? We relate back and say we now believe that it has to do with these lifestyle factors, which we'll talk about. But before I get to those factors, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of brain health and some of the factors that kind of come into play. First of all, know that beginning at age 40, the normal person will lose about 5% of their brain mass each decade following age 40. Our brains literally begin to shrink. What's interesting about those superagers that I talked about, Their brains are as plump and full upon autopsy as people who are decades younger than them. So researchers now are looking at, well, what causes this loss of brain mass? Because the fuller and plumper and cleaner that we can keep our brains over time, the better chance for long-term cognitive health. And we come back to the fact that it has to do with what we call brain trash. What is brain trash? Well, brain trash are the leftover waste residues from a lot of the processes that happen in our brains on a normal basis. So they're broken proteins, dead brain cells. They may consist of neurofibrillary tangles, which cause the death of those brain cells. So, brain trash, like any organism, if we're not taking out the trash on a regular basis and it begins to back up, we're going to have problems. In fact, your brain is a 3 pound organ that sits up here on your neck. It generates about 5 pounds of brain trash each and every year. Good news, though, folks. Our bodies were designed with incredible waste management systems. And in fact, our bodies, if they're functioning normally, are taking out the trash each and every day, or I'll be more specific, each and every night. So every night when you go to sleep, let me describe what happens to your brain. Sleep, if you've studied it at all, occurs in three phases. The first phase is usually described as light sleep. During light sleep, your body begins to calm down, your breathing slows, your heart rate slows, your body temperature begins to drop until it allows you to enter a phase of sleep called deep sleep. During deep sleep, your immune system is strengthened, tissues in the body are repaired, bones are healed. It's really the physical maintenance that goes on during that period of deep sleep. Now, eventually, by the way, when you're in deep sleep at the trough, you'll be at your coolest and calmest the entire night. However, you'll then begin to enter the third phase of sleep, which many people are familiar with. It's called REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep. It's during REM sleep that we dream. But what's interesting about REM sleep is remember I said in deep sleep you're calm and cool? Well, as you prepare to enter and go through REM sleep, your heart rate will increase, your breathing will increase. You may even begin perspiring. If you've ever woken from a dream like that was so real and you're breathing heavy and you may even be perspiring, it's because you woke during REM sleep, which by the way is not that much different than being fully awake, except that your brain has paralyzed your arms and legs so that you can't act out on what's going on up here. But I want to back you up one step to that deep sleep phase. Because as it pertains to the brain, when you enter deep sleep, your brain will begin to shrink. And in fact, during deep sleep, will shrink to about 65% of its normal size. When it shrinks, it will squeeze out those toxins, those waste products that have accumulated during the day, and fluids come up from your spinal cord, kind of washing over the brain cavity, washing those waste products into the body's waste systems and away from the body. So know that if we're not getting into deep sleep, we're not allowing for that cleansing process to occur. That process, by the way, was only discovered in 2013. That's how relatively recent that was. Part of the lymphatic system. You know, researchers used to think that the lymphatic system stopped at the neck, but now we know through this process that it actually continues throughout the body and is essential for keeping the brain clean. If the brain does not remain clean, if we get a buildup of that brain trash, typically as it occurs in cases of cognitive decline, it takes two primary forms. One are, if you've ever studied Alzheimer's, you probably heard about plaques, or more specifically, beta amyloid plaque. Plaques are substances that grow between the brain cells and interfere with the cell's abilities to communicate with one another. There's also something called neurofibrillary tangles, or you may hear them referred to as tau tangles, Tau. Tau is a protein inside the brain cell, which at times can become unmoored and tangled and winds up killing the brain cell. And if those dead brain cells are not removed, it can potentially spread to other nearby cells. And so, again, the importance, as I said, the body's built with systems to help us maintain and keep the brain clean, but there are things that we can do to promote that process. And that's what we'll talk about in just a second. But before we do leave this topic and get into these lifestyle areas, I just want to take a moment. It's something that Sarah mentioned at the beginning of our recording today, of our time together. She mentioned about being long-term care awareness month. Let me just talk to you about the cost of dementia and Alzheimer's. When we're first informed that a loved one has been diagnosed, finances are not the first thing that come to mind. But if any of you are currently caregivers or have been caregivers, you can attest to the fact that at some point you're going to be dealing with financial issues, the cost of medication, caregiving, maybe even changing housing needs. The issue that we have, as I mentioned in the beginning, the average rate of Alzheimer's survival is 4 to 8 years after diagnosis, but there's no way of telling exactly the progression the disease will take. So some may live 20 years or longer with the disease, during which you'll be managing these costs. When we look at typical resource costs in the area of dementia or Alzheimer's care, a home health care aide, and these are nationalized averages, not specifically where you live. The average cost of a home health care aide about 62,000 a year, assisted living about 54, and nursing homes about 108, but not if you need memory care. You can layer an additional 12 to $48,000 on top of those base costs for the specialized care. And most of you probably know that Medicare doesn't pay for long-term nursing home stays. Medicaid may pay for it. One drawback, you have to prove yourself penniless to your state government. Most people don't opt for that Medicaid route. However, what I will share with you is this is the part where many of my audiences kind of look back at the screen and say, oh, here's the part where John from Hartford sells us a long-term care product. Folks, we don't even have a long-term care product to market to you. What I am telling you is from a financial standpoint, if you rule out Medicaid, you basically have two ways to deal with the financial costs. One is by insuring against it through some type of long-term care. The other is paying it out of pocket. And just so you're aware, either are viable courses. If you're going to pay it out of pocket, the current estimate for lifetime cost of dementia care is just shy of $400,000. Now, you'll see the reasons on the left side: medical expenses, caregiving, modifying the home, so on and so forth. I think that number is a little bit light. One of the reasons is that lost income oftentimes refers only to lost income of the patient, not of lost income to the adult caregiver who may step away from or out of the workforce in order to provide that care. So I think we can all agree, whether it's from a quality of life standpoint or from a financial standpoint, anything that we can do to keep our brains healthy for as long as we can is going to be to our good. So let's talk about how to age proof your brain. Lifestyle areas where research is now saying that small modifications may actually make a big difference in decreasing risk. The first one, you probably already guessed. It's your sleep patterns. Sleep is your greatest ally in the fight to retain your brain. Now, I put this slide up, and sometimes people are like, oh no, John, I wake up at least once every night. I got news for you, folks. If we're sleeping normally, all of us are waking up 4 to 6 times every night. That light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep that I talked about occurs in 90-minute cycles throughout the night. Just turns out that earlier in the night, by the time you wake up, you don't even realize you're awake yet before you're falling into the next sleep cycle. So this is why many physicians recommend that. I think the national recommendation is 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. If you're not getting 7 hours, you're not getting 9 hours, or you're getting more than 9 hours, it's a red flag that it's probably something you want to talk to your physician about. Because these 4 to 6 cycles, or that 7 to 9 hours, allow 4 to 6 cycles of that cleansing to occur to the brain. So anything that we can do to ensure we're getting good sleep is going to be helpful for long-term cognitive health. So I have a couple of tips for you. The first tip regarding your sleep habits happens not at night, but first thing in the morning. The Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2017 was awarded to three researchers who determined that the brain has its own natural circadian clock. So therefore, a circadian clock triggering that The sunrise and the sunset do different things to us physically. One of the best things you can do for your sleep pattern occurs in the morning, first thing. It's to get outside in natural light for about 10 minutes within the first 30 minutes of waking up. The researchers say that process resets the circadian clock in our brains so that in the evening, our bodies begin to tell our brains when it's time to begin to start calming down and preparing for sleep. So, again, I don't care what it is you do, whether you go to check the mail at the mailbox, go to walk your dog even if you don't have a dog, anything that you need to do to get outside for about 10 minutes within those first 30 minutes of waking is going to be really important to resetting that circadian clock. Now, people say, John, it's cold outside this time of year. Can I sit by a sunny window? You can, but it decreases the effectiveness by about 40%. So if you can try and get outside in natural light early, great for your sleep habits. Second, sleep in true darkness. Some of you are thinking, John, we sleep at night. Of course, it's true darkness. Folks, we now have more sources of artificial light in our sleep environments than ever before in history. Oftentimes, again, starting with one of these that sits 3 feet from our heads because we disconnected the landline. And when we do wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and we need to go to the bathroom, we go, oh, I wonder what time it is. We pick up that phone, we look at the time. Whoa, would you look at all the texts that I missed that came in after? Oh, and I forgot to call this person back. And you've just opened the office at 4 a.m. Not the highest and best use of your time if you're trying to get functional sleep. Yes, it's about the light, the blue light that comes from the phone screen, but it's also about the cognitive involvement that you're involved with there. But it's also about other sources of light in the sleep environment as well. Maybe some of you remember the tennis pro Pete Sampras. Pete Sampras, 25 years ago, when he traveled the world, would keep a roll of tape in his carry bag. The first thing he would do when he would check into a hotel room is tape the drapes together. He would tape the drapes to the wall. He would look for the thermostat on the side of the wall that has that little green glow. He put a piece of tape over that. If he couldn't reach the plug to the digital alarm clock, tape went over that. The little red light on the TV that tells you that it's getting power even it's turned off, tape over that. And the smoke detector in the hotel room with the little red light that shows it's getting tape over that. Pete Sampras believed that if he could minimize light in the sleep environment, it would enable him to better focus and concentrate on his tennis match the next day. 25 years later, research would prove that he was right. Be careful of of light in the sleep environment. Your eyes can take in light even when your lids are closed. If you don't believe me, if you've ever flown West Coast to East Coast on one of those overnight red eye flights, I always sit next to the person who wants to read all night long. I never leave home without my sleep mask in my backpack. Because sleep masks are a very effective way to block out the light. But doing a light audit in your sleep environment, important to maintaining quality sleep. And lastly, I don't mean to cause relationship issues if you're a member of a couple, but it's a good idea to chill down the sleep environment by a few degrees over what you would hang out at during the day. The reason is, remember I said in light sleep, your body is calming and cooling down so that it can enter into deep sleep. If the sleep environment is already cool, your body doesn't have to work as hard to transition into that phase of deep sleep. So, wherever you hang out at during the day, try lowering the degree in the sleep environment 2 to 3 degrees for better sleep quality. I do get asked about naps. I'm a big fan of a nap. Take one where you can grab them, but I do have a couple of rules about naps. They do count to the 7 to 9 hours, but please don't rely on naps to get you to that every day, right? That again would be a symptom, something you'd want to talk to your doctor about. But when it comes to naps, here are my two rules. Number one is don't take a nap at 10 p.m. and wonder why you can't fall asleep at 11, right? So timing the nap is important. But secondly, when it comes to naps, and this one's the hard one, you should strive to keep your naps to 20 to 25 minutes. Well, why? Well, because you don't want to wake up in a deeper phase of sleep, either deep sleep or REM sleep. We've all done it. You tell yourself you're just going to stretch across the bed or lie down on the sofa for a few minutes. You wake up an hour later. When you wake up and you begin to walk down the hallway, you don't remember what planet you're from, what your name is, who you're related to, or anything you were working on before you lay down to take that nap. Research shows you'll have to go through another full sleep cycle before you're able to focus and concentrate again. So try to keep the naps 20 to 25 minutes. That keeps you waking up during the light sleep phase, which won't impact your ability to focus and concentrate as much the rest of the day. So sleep is number one. Number two is nutrition. You are what you eat. You have as many brain cells in your gut as you do in your brain. They're connected by something called the vagus nerve, right? So your gut is constantly talking to your brain about the kind of chemicals and hormones that need to be released in the body, and they can affect your mood, your sleep, and overall brain health. But certain foods can lower the risk of dementia. I'll make this really easy for you because there are diets out there, like one called the MIND diet, MIND, but it's very, very similar to the Mediterranean diet. I think many of us have heard of the Mediterranean diet. If you're unfamiliar, there's a couple of things that are really important on the Mediterranean diet. The presence of fresh, whole foods, avoiding additives and preservatives. The other is eating in the food groups that we know are good for us, the lean proteins like the cold water fish, the salmon, mackerel, cod, trout, tuna, fruits and veggies, especially the leafy greens, healthy fats like extra virgin olive oil, nuts if you're not allergic to them, legumes, beans, all kinds of beans, red kidney beans, pinto beans. Why these foods? Because not only should they be fresh and whole, but also these are foods that limit inflammation in the body. Inflammation can occur in more than just the joints, it can occur in the tissues of the body. When we have inflammation in the body's immune system kicks in. It sends out attack T cells that are going to attack the source of the inflammation. One problem, those T cells don't always know the difference between problem cells and organisms and healthy cells. And sometimes the body's immune system can actually attack itself. You may have heard of autoimmune diseases such as lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes. These are all classified as autoimmune diseases. The body's immune system is either overreacting or underreacting due to what it senses as a threat in the body. So, one of the ways that we can help to keep this under control is to eat foods that are anti inflammatory in nature. That would be, again, the fresh whole foods, no preservatives in these food groups. Let me point out the type of food that you don't want to eat for long term cognitive health. So, if you go to visit a museum in Chicago called the Museum of Industry and Science, at least it was there last year, I think. In their museum, behind a double pane glass box, there's a Hostess Twinkie that was unwrapped 10 years ago. It looks as fresh and delicious as if it were unwrapped 10 seconds ago. If anyone wants to guess the reported shelf life of a Hostess Twinkie, if you would guess 43 years, you would be on the number. That's something you can share with your Thanksgiving guests over the holiday next week. These are not the foods that you want to eat. You want foods that are going to spoil on your counter, that are going to rot in your refrigerator if you don't get to them in a timely basis. So, fresh whole foods in the healthy food groups, the purpose here in terms of brain health and overall health is to limit inflammation in the body because tissues can become inflamed, and that includes brain tissue. And we don't want the immune system taking issue with our brain tissue. The third area is stress. So you may think to yourself when I say the stress surprise, what is the stress? Well, a lot of stresses are surprises or things that we don't expect. And believe it or not, a little bit of stress is actually healthy for long-term cognitive health. Why is that? Because when something happens that you don't expect, what do you have to do? What's one of the first things you have to do? You have to think. You have to look at the situation and try to categorize it and understand it. Let me give you a for instance. Let's say that you're on your way to run some errands this afternoon. And by the way, I hope this doesn't happen to anyone, but while you're out driving your car down the road, boom, tire blows out. What's the first thing you're going to do? I had a woman stand up 2 weeks ago and yell, I'm going to swear. I said, no, you got to think of the right swear word to use. She said, no, it comes to me naturally. I don't even have to think. But seriously, what you're going to do is you're going to think, where can I pull over safely? Right? Because something happened. I got to get out of the flow of traffic. And then you're going to start pulling from memory. Did I pay the AAA premium? Do I have the card in my wallet? Do I know what the phone number is? What happened the last time something like this happened? Who came to help me? Do I have a jack in the car? Would I even know how it works if I have one? You see, we start running through all the cognitive processes to try and solve the problem that we're facing. So some stress is good. However, our problem is we're now surrounded by stress. Much of it on our phones and our TVs and our radios telling us the worst thing that ever happened in our lives just happened 10 minutes ago, and we don't know if we'll ever recover from it, right? When we're stressed, the brain says release the cortisol. What's cortisol? It's a hormone that increases your heart rate, it increases your breathing, it gets your body ready to do one of two things: fight or run, fight or flight response, right? There's a that occurs in the oldest part of your brain. It's called the amygdala. It's also referred to sometimes as the reptilian brain because it just reacts. It reacts and it acts. And by the way, it has served us really, really well over time because when we sense a problem or a warning, we'll take steps to avoid that to keep ourselves safe. Here's the problem, though, is that it's now overstimulated. There's another part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex. This is the area where we add rationale, we add thinking, we add memories, we try to put things in perspective. Well, if between stimulus and response, we can engage that part of our brain, many times the result is our brain coming out on the other end saying, hold it, wait a minute, it's a flat tire. We can handle this. There are a number of options. We don't have to freak out. Your brain begins to lessen the cortisol in the body, and we get back to a normal processing. But the key is when we're stressed or feeling overwhelmed, we need to do some things maybe to kind of interrupt that response. A couple of things we recommend. If you've never participated in breathing exercises, let's do one right now. I'll show you how easy this is. When I say go, here's what I want you to do. Take a deep breath in through your nose. And while you're breathing in, I want you to think and breathe in relaxation. We're going to hold it. So that should be about 5 seconds in through the nose. Hold it for 2 seconds and then breathe out through the mouth. And when you breathe out through the mouth, think about breathing out worry. So you ready? In through the nose, 5 seconds. Hold it out through the mouth. What you just did gives your brain a whole fresh dose of oxygen. Just a minute ago, you were thinking, when is this guy going to stop speaking? I'm getting hungry for lunch. Now you forgot all about that. You're just having a great time. This could go on all afternoon. See, giving yourself a break, right, by breathing. If you wake up in the middle of the night, you can't go back to sleep. Try a few breathing exercises. Tell yourself, not the highest and best use of my time at 3 a.m., worrying about what's going to happen at 3 p.m. the next day. So try to use some breathing exercises to supply your brain with oxygen, calm yourself down, changing your perspective. I'll give you a quick example. Dr. Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In that book, he describes a situation where a father gets on a subway train in New York City with like 3 young children. Within 10 minutes, these kids are going crazy. They're swinging from the bars. They're loud. They're bumping into people. He can't even read his newspaper. Finally, he's had it. He says to the guy, Sir, will you mind controlling your children? And the fellow looks back at him and says, Oh, I'm sorry. We just came from the hospital where they lost their mother a few hours ago. And I guess I wasn't really thinking about my surroundings. Covey called it the aha moment. We may not have all the information to make the judgment that we're currently in the process of making. That driver drives down the right shoulder and cuts right in front of you. Ugh. Maybe there was a medical emergency. Maybe there wasn't, but is it really going to change your life if that driver gets to the next red light, one car in front of you? Probably not. This is what I mean about adding perspective, changing your perspective, knowing that you may not have all the information. And the last is a little exercise that we recommend called Rose Thorn Bud. What is Rose Thorn Bud? Well, let's say you have a conversation or a phone call this afternoon or in the coming days, which make you either sad or angry. I want you to go through a little process for me. I want you to think about the rose. What's the rose? That's the best thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours. Then I want you to think about the thorn. That's the worst thing that happened to you in the last 24 hours because chances are whatever's bugging you may not be the worst thing that's happened in the last 24 hours. And the bud, what does that stand for? That's the thing you're most looking forward to in the next 24 hours. You see, just by exercising your cognitive ability to both recall from memory and project forward into anticipation is calling that prefrontal cortex into play and maybe stopping the reaction between the stressor and your reactive reaction in order to provide some relief from that cortisol that we feel. Because, folks, the fact of the matter is, if we're suffering from anxiety issues, we're running on red alert 24/7. That cortisol is pumping through our bodies, and our bodies weren't meant to handle that kind of stress. So, seeking ways to manage stress is the third area that we need to think about for long term cognitive health. The fourth area, physical movement. If there was one prescription I could give you besides better sleep habits, it's physical activity. What kind of physical activity? I don't really care. You like to walk, go for a walk. You want to ride a bike? Great. Like to play golf, like to go shopping, whatever. Get out there and do it. In fact, one of the best exercises for long term cognitive health is what the woman here in the slide is doing. Dance. Why is dancing good for cognitive health? Well, it engages almost every nerve and muscle in your body. If you're dancing with a group of people or a partner, you have to read the kind of the social cues about what they're doing. So it keeps you cognitively aware. And we have to remember what it is we're supposed to be doing, the steps of the dance. This is usually the point in my presentation where it's typically a gentleman will raise his hand and say, John, what's the second best exercise? I'm just kidding. I don't care. Whatever exercise keeps you moving that you enjoy doing. In fact, we've created a little acronym to kind of keep it fresh for you. We call it CARS. The C stands for setting visual cues. If you've ever studied habit formation, visual cues are really, really important. For instance, you want to go for a walk the next day. Make sure you put your walking shoes in front of the door so you practically have to trip over them to get out the door. It's a reminder to say, oh, that's right. I was going to go for a walk today. When we say action, what I don't want to hear from folks is saying, "Look, I haven't been to a gym for 10 years, but because I listened to John yesterday, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week for 3 hours a day next week." It's not going to happen. I want you to think about how you can work more action into the normal course of your day or week, such as parking further away from the grocery store, taking a flight of steps if you're able, things that encourage physical activity through the normal course of your life routine. And lastly, the reward and support, they're kind of self-explanatory, but do something you like with people you enjoy doing it with. Because if you flip it on the flip side, if you do something you can't stand with people you don't like, you're not going to sustain that. There's tons of research out there that says that doing something physically with friends, whether it's golfing, walking, swimming, attending a class of some type, you're much more likely to continue in the course of that exercise regimen than if you try to go it yourself. So again, exercise, implementing exercise activity, keep moving throughout your life, extremely important, not only for cognitive health, but overall health. And the last area, cross training your brain. Now, this is one when I put it up, people are like, great, John, that's great. You know why? I love crosswords. Well, that's great if you love crosswords. I do too. But if all you do are crosswords, what are you going to get good at? Doing crosswords. You've got to mix it up, right? In fact, what Dr. Milstein would say is that, if you picked up, let's say, a guitar because you always wanted to learn how to play a guitar, he would say, don't learn to play Ode to Joy and play it for 2 years till you can play it like Eric Clapton. Play it for like 2 weeks and then learn a new song. Guess what? It's not going to feel good. It's going to kind of be frustrating. Your fingers won't feel right. It won't sound right. It's going to be uncomfortable. That feeling of frustration or discomfort is your brain making new neural pathways to try and link what you're trying to learn to things that you already know. It's trying to link to kind of common occurrences or linchpins in your brain, if you will, that can help it kind of increase the uptake of that activity. It also increases the release of a hormone called norepinephrine, which aids in that cleansing process that I talked about. And lastly, there's a process that occurs in the brain when we're learning new things called myelination. Myelin is a substance that coats the brain cells to make the electrical transfers occur more easily between brain cells. Those superagers that I mentioned earlier upon autopsy, their brains are loaded with myelin. There's a natural curiosity about learning new things. So embrace the frustration. Think of it this way, it's the way you're keeping your brain plump and healthy throughout your life. There's a couple of ways that you can learn new things. You can learn new things physically. You can take a new class. You can try to play pickleball like the rest of the country is. Everybody else doing it. You can do it too. Whatever it is, try something new physically. You can try something new mentally. You can try your hand at a new language. You can read the book you've been promising yourself for 2 years now to read on a topic that engages you that you find interesting. I always like thinking about it. Stephen Covey, who I referenced earlier, would say if you wanted to truly learn something like you have to present on it the next day. So, again, reading to learn, kind of learning more about the world around you, great mentally. But, folks, the number one thing we recommend is learning new things socially. What does that mean? Meeting new people. I could put up charts and graphs that show you that as we age, especially now that we're living into our 80s, 90s, and 100s, as we age, we're more likely to spend more time alone. One of the ways to combat against that is to prepare to accept invitations to places and occurrences where I might meet new people. I already mentioned some of those studies about the impact of loneliness on us overall and our overall health. I can tell you one of the number one factors that can predict a long lived, healthy life. This comes from both Harvard as well as MIT. Relationships, relationships, relationships. We peak at making friends at age 24, not because you're not the same gregarious self that you were back then, but oftentimes we're not in the same environments. We're not surrounded by people of our own age at the same stage of life. We have to be more intentional about meeting new people as we age. And I don't want to leave this topic without bringing up a related condition or something that interferes with learning something new. The topic is hearing aids. Hearing aids, one of the most underutilized medical devices in the country today. It's estimated about two-thirds of people who need them don't get them because of stigma issues or what they perceive as comfort issues. By the way, the new technologies are amazing. But second of all, here's what I want you to know. If you have mild untreated hearing loss, you are twice as likely to develop dementia during your lifetime. If you have severe untreated hearing loss, you or a loved one, and it goes untreated, you increase the risk of dementia 5 times during your lifetime. Being able to hear is being able to learn. It's being able to socialize. When we lose that hearing, we've probably seen it. We get together with a group of friends. All of a sudden, someone who is normally participative says, I think I'm just going to hang back tonight. I'll catch up with you all next time. It may be because they're having difficult hearing what's going on. They don't want to be called out for it. They begin to self shelter, and that can lead to isolation, loneliness, depression, the ills that follow. So, again, addressing other issues like hearing, like sleep apnea, so on and so forth. Diabetes, for example. Untreated diabetes, some doctors actually call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes now because the links are so direct in terms of development of that cognitive condition. So, making sure we're taking care of ourselves, making sure we're learning new things, really important. And to wrap up today, folks, I just want to mention supplements because before I put this slide up, we would always get questions after the presentation about what about supplements. In fact, it usually came in a form that went something like this. John, I got to tell you, about 6 months ago, I ordered this supplement for my favorite cable TV news channel. It's made from like crushed up seashells or something. And since I've been taking it, I have been able to remember things and recall things like I haven't done in 20 years. And I would say, that is phenomenal. What's the name of the supplement? And they would respond, I don't remember. Be very careful. The marketing has put itself in front of the medicine. Dr. Milstein says there are no reliable long-term studies at this point that show that supplementation has any impact on cognitive health. Maybe they will arrive at some point, but they're not here today. I can't speak for supplementation in other areas of your health. I will ask this though. If you're taking supplements, please be sure they're under the direction of your physician, or at least that your physician knows about them, because supplements can interfere with some prescription drugs. Secondly, supplements are not regulated by the FDA, so you're not exactly sure what you're supplementing and why. And also, some of the old rules of thumb that we used to use for taking supplements in certain conditions, like sleep supplements, for example. There's examples now or research that shows that if we supplement to try and increase our sleepiness, sometimes our body stops producing as much of that natural occurring hormone as it would if we weren't supplementing. So we're supplementing just to get ourselves up to our body's kind of natural position there. So again, just be careful with supplements, especially when it comes to cognitive supplements, and make sure to talk to your doctor about what you're supplementing and why. They may be able to provide some testing, so on and so forth, that shows whether or not you need those supplements. So we live in a day of social media. Every day it seems there's something new that somebody's trying to take or recommend for longevity or whatever it is. Just be mindful of that. Make sure you're talking to your doctor about it. So, folks, we talked about your age versus your brain's age. Remember those super agers being able to say, what are they doing that everybody else is not? We talked about the physical processes in the brain and how we want to use the body's natural abilities to keep the brain clean and therefore hopefully maintain brain mass as long as we can. And we talked about the financial part of dementia. And then lastly, those five areas. Remember, sleep habits, nutrition, stress management, exercise, and learning new things. And by the way, I know we threw an awful lot at you, but we will make sure that Sarah and Margie have copies of a white paper that was written by Dr. Milstein. It's kind of a summary of what I talked about today, where if you're interested in it, we can actually follow up with you with a copy of that. And if you're really interested in the topic, I don't get any royalties from it. But again, the name of Dr. Milstein's book, The Age-Proof Brain, it's an easy read. It's not an academic read. It's meant for practical implementation. It's not a long read. I liked it a lot. I learned a lot from it myself, especially when it comes to this quote that we'll end with, which is a sharp mind into older age isn't just a bit of luck. We now believe it's in reach for most of us. So with that, Sarah, I'm going to turn it back over to you for some closing comments. And on behalf of Hartford Funds, thanks very much for the time today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm just going to pop up a closing slide here. But John, we just want to thank you for your time and your expertise. And I like what you said at the beginning, and especially I have a history of dementia in my family, and I know many others do too. This hopeful data that is
Mhm.
coming out and the feeling of, yes, we can control things today and little things. I mean, I know getting a bit more sleep, sometimes that can seem like a big thing, but there are actionable things we can all be doing today that can make a big difference in the future. So thank you very much. And for those on the call, as John said, if you have questions about the presentation, please let us know. As I mentioned in the beginning, if long-term care insurance is something you are curious about and seeing how that may fit into your financial plan, please know we are here as a resource, and long-term care is just one arm of having a solid financial plan. Things like income planning strategies as you get closer to retirement, asset allocation, understanding Medicare, Social Security, those different pieces. Please know we are here. Jesse's information is up here. Feel free to reach out to her with any questions and we will make sure to get back to you. But in the meantime, it is hard to believe Thanksgiving is next week. So John, and for those on the call, we hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving and we can all share the fun fact about the Twinkie and how long that shelf life is. That was amazing. That was a new fact learned. So thank you very much, John.
You're welcome.
All right. Take care, everyone.